Hi, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic, amazing, extraordinary presentation. I'm your host, Jim Popa, and I'm joined here today by Jason Jurado, who has an amazing story. He actually is of Apache Indian heritage, and he is, in his own words, he's been following in his early childhood, he's been following in his paternal grandmother, who was an Apache medicine woman, and he took after her, basically, when he was a kid. Then later on, he became a Marine Corps and he started travel the world and learn from all of the amazing places he's been visiting. And I mean, in particular, he has been taken by the Zen meditation and mindfulness techniques that he got in touch with in Japan. And in 2009, he started practicing and learning NLP, and he became also a NLP practitioner and in the line of Ted James company, and he started to use NLP and hypnosis. He also is using NLP with business, and he's also teaching NLP to others. And he has actually helped clients both in their business and in their personal and in their professional life. Like I said, helping clients with NLP techniques to grow their businesses or to multiply their businesses, as well as helping clients getting over phobias and PTSD and other such things, because he himself is a veteran, so he knows how to help people in those cases. And so today, Jason will teach us, will talk to us, will present to us, and will enrich us with a very beautiful subject, and that is submodalities. And so the title of his presentation is Using Submodalities to Live Your Desired Life. So everybody, let's welcome Jason. Thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation.
Yes, thank you, Eugene. It's great to be here.
So what are submodalities for, I mean, we have people here who are, you know, some of them, they've been doing NLP for 20, 30 years. Some of them, they just learned about NLP from an ad they saw on Facebook or anywhere else. And it's like, what the heck is that? So because we want to address everyone, I will, you know, please start with what are those things called submodalities, and then of course go fully into your presentation. And every now and then I'll just pop in to make some questions or comments to make sure we can touch all of the bases and people you know, get the best from your presentation. I'll shut up. Take it away.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here. You know, one of the things talking about the people that are watching this, you know, starting from people that have just maybe heard of NLP and all the way to people that are, you know, master trainers and have been doing it for a very long time. You know, recently someone had asked me, you know, what's my favorite technique? They also do NLP, and like, what's your favorite technique to use? And I had to stop and think about it, because, you know, the process we talk about when we learn things, we go from unconscious incompetence, you know, we don't know what we don't know, to conscious incompetence, and we realize what we don't know. Then we go to conscious competence, you know, we know what we know. And then there's unconscious competence. And that's kind of what happens is over time is it just becomes part of who you are and what you do. And I think that's why it's important to talk about submodalities, because it's such a base thing of neurolinguistics, and it's something that's out there, but it drives so many things that we do in neurolinguistics. You know, we talk about NLP being the language, using the language of the mind to get the results that you want. And one of the main languages of the mind, how we code, is submodalities. I do want to start with a little bit of a bigger picture, though, because, you know, when we talk about submodalities, so what are modalities? You know, I want to mention, you know, we talk about, have you ever wondered how you know that you love a certain dessert, or you don't care for another one? Or maybe you wonder why you have negative feelings.
I love desserts, just so we put it out there. Desserts are my thing.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people like that. And, or why you have negative feelings about a certain event, or positive feelings, and how you remember to have those feelings. As we go through our lives, one of the main processes that we use giving meaning to events, this little jargonistic, so stand with me for a second, is using a specific sequence of representational systems. And that's we call strategies. So to unpack that, representational systems, which we call modalities, are just our senses. So visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Within the kinesthetic, we have tactile, which is touch and feel. And then there's also emotions. That's also considered kinesthetic. It's a feeling. and then to a lesser degree, smell and taste. So we have all those that are in our life. Now, we have strategies for everything that we do. We have love strategies, hate strategies, strategies for sex, motivation, health, disease, reality strategies to know what's real. So we have a lot of strategies that we use like that. And what we do is strategies are a sequence of those modalities, basically. So when you think about it, the reason why every time you go out to drive your car, you don't have to remember how to drive a car every time. And maybe the first time you drove a car, you thought about getting in the car, putting the key in, having your hands at 10 and 2, et cetera, et cetera. You had that strategy where you really had to piece it together. But now most of us that are driving, you got one hand on the wheel, you got music playing, you're paying attention to maybe your friends talking to you. You're still watching the road. Of course, your unconscious mind is paying attention as well. You're being safe, but it's just not so much. And the reason why you don't have to relearn that is because you have that strategy on how to drive inside. One of the things, though, within that is the intensity of meaning to an event or item is in direct relationship to submodalities, okay? And submodalities are the component elements or what makes up the modalities of representational systems.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of an event or an item, what's the color, the size, the distance of the visual image, the brightness, the loudness. I have a full, there's a full checklist that we do when we work with clients to really get down to it. So it's basically the nuances of your senses, how it breaks down. And that's where the power comes.
The nuances of the senses. I love that. I like that very much.
Yeah, it's in the details, right? So by changing how you represent that image in your mind, you really shift how you respond to it. So if it's okay, could we do a quick exercise right now?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So go ahead and pick a past pleasant experience. Maybe not your greatest memory, but something that was good, a good pleasant experience. Now, when you think of that, do you have a picture?
Yeah.
Good. So now change one submodality of that picture. Maybe make it less bright or adjust where you see the picture. Do just one and see how it changes how you feel about the event.
Or I'll make it black and white.
Okay. And see how that makes it feel.
Yeah, it's like suddenly I'm not so interested in that anymore.
Yes.
It's like
so go ahead.
Taking the life out of it.
Yes. And so go ahead and put it back. Put it back the way that it was.
Okay.
All right. Now let's change one other submodality and see how that changes. And so maybe move the location or just do one other change and see how that works.
So yeah, it's like I added some very foul smell.
And it changed it for sure.
Yeah. Well, suddenly it's not so peachy anymore, so to speak.
Exactly. So go ahead and put it back the way it was. Let's go ahead and remove those smells and put it back the way it was. Let's get that picture back so it's that exact past pleasant experience. You remember it the way it was. And then go ahead and lock that into place. And now there's a couple ways we do that when we work with clients. There's those that remember what Tupperware is, that old locking sound, but you can lock it in place like that. Or now modern times, we use a mouse click and just click it into place and just lock that in place. So that memory's back and it's good and solid.
I like the clicking it in place, like pin it.
Yes, perfect. And then what we do is when we work with these submodalities and these pictures of the mind, we want to what we call clear the screen. So maybe think of a snowstorm, think of a beautiful nature picture, just think of something else, and just clear the screen, get a new picture.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to do one more and we're going to do it together. So pick something that you may not like as much, but you would like it more. So maybe it's a food, or maybe it's doing a task, and make sure
doing a task,
you want to change. Perfect, and it's something you want to change your relationship to.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you think of that, do you have a picture?
Yeah.
All right. So let's adjust it and observe how you relate to that item or task. So maybe make that picture a little brighter, make it a little clearer, a little crystal clear. Move it so it's a little closer to you. and see how that feels.
Okay.
All right. And then once that picture is a little brighter, a little clearer, a little closer to you, we'll go ahead and lock that into place. We talked about, pin it up there. All right. Then clear the screen. Think of a nature picture, think of something, how the weather is where you're at today. And now then think about that task that you're doing and think of if that changed a little bit for you.
Well, I kind of pinned it next to the other one that was nice, you know. It's like that was there, and then I pinned the other one next to it.
Perfect. And that's something we're going to talk about in a bit too.
Awesome.
That's a technique. Obviously, you're trained, and that's something you're
No,
aware of. And that's
I
a great
didn't
technique.
it's like you said pin it, so it's like, okay, pin that one, and then pin it, okay, pin that one there.
That's great. And now, just with those two examples, you can see this is a very powerful tool, you know, and you can use that to adjust how you interact with the world in a more positive way. You know, if there was something that you like too much and you would like to like it less, you know, you could back off the submodalities. You can make it a little darker, move it a little away. There's certain things that are drivers. What we call the drivers are the difference that makes the difference. There's a few things that are common to most of us. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So when you help people with this process, you have to kind of observe them. You know, NLP is about observation, sensory acuity. So you see how it works for them, and you help them adjust that picture so you get the results that they want. And of course, if there's something that you would like to like more, you can do the same with making it brighter, clearer, closer to you. Those are some of the common things about pictures that we like. You know, these are very powerful tools. They seem that they could be a little basic, but they're very powerful. So it's always best to work with someone who's trained in NLP and can support you in having the most positive results, you know. But as you go through your daily life and you have these observations, you know, you can play with them yourself as well. Just keeping in mind that it is very powerful.
Love it.
You know, one of the things is, this is a quote, you know, we tend to live our lives with a lot of responses being automatic, and this supports us in being more deliberate on how we use our minds.
Beautiful.
Something about what you know, we were talking about the pictures that you had in your head, and we, you know, we elicit some modalities with the client. We ask about that picture. There's a fine line between elicitation and installation.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's best to work with someone who's trained in NLP and actually can run you through it. So if you were to really go through, it has to be done quickly, because the unconscious mind, which we're working with, the unconscious mind works really quick. So if I was to say, do you have a picture? And you said, yes. And I said, is it color? And you'd say, yes. Or is it black and white? And you go, yes. Because you're giving it that time to try it on. The unconscious mind is like, okay, let's try that on. So when you go through an elicitation, basically it's, and I'm going to run through one just because of kind of a little, it's fun, you know, to see. So I'll say, do you have a picture? Is it black and white or color? Near or far? Is it bright or dim? Where's the location? What's the size of the picture? Associated or dissociated? And we run it, and that's the tempo that we run at. We really want to get there because we really want to know how the picture is now. We don't want to know how you can make the picture, because to one extent or another, we can all make pictures in our minds. That's what we do. There's also a process that we use with submodalities that's called contrastive analysis between two items. And, you know, as an example, if you're looking for motivation on a project or an area of your life, you can find another area of your life that you're fully motivated. And then you would elicit the submodalities of that, of how you want to be. So you'd get the picture, and we would write down the submodalities of that motivation. And then we would get the submodalities of the picture of where you currently are at. We would look at the submodalities differences that need to change. And then we would cross that over, and then we would actually make the submodalities of where you're currently at the same submodalities of motivation. And it really drives that. It's great. You know, one of the ones that my instructor that would use is the stoplight and go light. You know,
Okay.
if you're sitting at a stoplight and the light turns green and it's safe, do you go? Do you go every time? And you,
Hmm.
most of us would say yes. And then you
Yeah.
elicit the submodalities of that, because that's a very powerful one. And I'm using driving, you know, not everyone drives, but for most people do drive.
Yeah.
And that's, so it's a common, what we call a universal. And
Hmm.
you can see sometimes people, you watch under the desk and their foot's going like they're pushing the gas because they want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can imagine putting those submodalities on top of like of a project you want to do. You know, it really, pun not intended, but it really drives you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that helps, you know, and it also works with confidence. You know, if you have it in your
Hmm.
life where you want to have more confidence, you could find something that you're confident in and do the same thing. So you would elicit the submodalities from confidence, and then you would change and then elicit the ones from where you don't have so much confidence, and then you would cross those over and you'd give that. Now, the one thing I want to mention is there's a huge difference between confidence and competence, right?
Hmm.
If I had to pick one or the other, I definitely want a competent doctor, not a confident doctor. So,
Yes, for sure.
so
For
with
sure.
these, you know, they have a scope. So I can't teach you how to a foreign language.
Yeah.
But what I can do is, if you're learning a foreign language, we can take the confidence you have from speaking your native tongue and translate that over to speaking this new language.
Hmm.
And that confidence will help you with that.
Sounds great. I like that. So have you used it with learning like different languages, for instance? Because you've been saying, you know, been going all over the place, and also you've been in Japan. So have you ever tried it that way?
You know, a lot of my travels, well, were earlier on in my career, pre NLP. So I haven't had a
Hmm.
chance to use them on myself as much.
Hmm.
My wife is learning Spanish,
Uh-huh.
and I've used it with her to help her along her
Ah, that's
studies.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's helped.
Awesome.
Yeah. Um, you know, this has so many uses and in so many ways. You know, we're talking about living the life that you desire. And there's two parts to that, I think. You know, really living the life you desire is removing the negatives, you know,
Yeah.
getting rid of negatives from your life, getting rid of, you know, limiting decisions and stuff like that, and then driving you towards the positives.
Hmm.
Something that I used, I want to share that I used with a client, talking about negatives, is I had a client come to me, and unfortunately she'd been a witness to an accident,
Hmm.
and it was a tragic accident, and she was having a lot of issues sleeping. She had a lot of stress. You know, it was affecting her life, and she was really struggling with it. So she came to see me, and we talked, you know, talked about the situation. And
Yeah.
you know, I made sure, obviously, you know, a big part of NLP is rapport. So we had a lot of
Yeah.
rapport built up, and she felt safe and comfortable with me. You know, she knew she was in a safe space. And as we talked about it, you know, I really looked at the ecology of changing that picture for her, you know, because there's some things in
Hmm.
our lives that we have to learn the lessons from. You know, our
Yeah.
unconscious mind holds a little bit back from us, but we have to process it at the level we process it at. And you don't just go and change everything to pretty pictures, you know, even with some modalities. That doesn't work. So
Yeah.
it has to work, be the right way and the right decision for that client, for the person. And
Yeah.
we use it on ourselves as well. So, you know, I figured that was right for her. It was a thing to do. And we changed the submodalities of the picture, because she had a picture, and the picture was
Hmm.
really bright. It was really right in front of her. It was crystal clear. There was sounds involved of it. It was, you know, not to put
Hmm.
anyone in a negative state. It was
Yeah.
serious. And we just changed it. You know, we got it away from her, made it darker, made it a fuzzy picture. What we ended up doing actually is taking that picture as a size, making it in the size of a postage stamp all the way on the other side of the wall. And there's other techniques you can do with that, because I still think with this particular client, she still needed to process. She still needed to work through. So I didn't totally get rid of the picture with her, because that wasn't the right thing to do. But as soon as we did that, like, I just watched her change. The color came back into her skin. And, she was really pale before, and her breathing was really erratic before, and her breathing calmed down. And just, all the things we look at for sensory acuity with NLP, just all the signals showed me that she just totally let that go and was able to live her life again, basically. And, she reported back to me that she was sleeping well and she was dealing with it, and it just helped her out tremendously.
Amazing. Love it. Oh, so many great stories, when you get into this business, so to speak, of working with NLP and such, it's like, it never ends.
Right. Yeah. And talking about, and that is the one that it's very rewarding. Some of the training that we talk about in NLP is that you have to be careful of being too involved in the outcome. But also it's humanistic. We want it to be humanistic. We're helping people with their lives, and there's a certain extent that you have to. The client won't actualize anything that you don't believe they can. We know that, that's Milton Erickson, right?
What do you mean by actualizing? Just so we make clear for everyone what that
they won't.
means.
They won't. Thank you for the question. Yeah, sometimes we talk jargon too. They won't accomplish what they want to accomplish. They won't be the person they want to be. They won't reach their goals, so to speak.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So that helps them with that. One of the things that I was talking also about living the life you desire is about getting rid of the negatives, so like something where you have that negative memory or something like that, getting rid of that. But I think one of the ways also is, to help people with their goals, because, you set that goal and then you achieve it. That's going to help you live the life you desire. And that's something that we work a lot on, that I work with clients on a lot, is being very clear on their goals and then helping them get to achieve those goals. So talking about goal setting and using submodalities, we talked about. So there's different ways to set goals, and this isn't we're not talking about setting goals. So whether you use, the SMART, SMART acronym goals, or another system, using submodalities to achieve that. So once you have that goal, ask yourself, what is the last thing that would have to happen so that you would know that you have achieved that goal? As an example, like people going on vacation. How do you know you're on vacation? Some people might say, when I decide, or when I buy that ticket, or when the ticket shows up. For me, I'm that person that I know I'm on vacation when I get through security and I'm at my gate. Then I'm like,
yes. Last.
Yes. So
it's like the gate cuts off all the work, all the troubles, all the problems, everything that you had to take care of and deal with.
Yes. Yeah. And so for me, that would be the picture that I would have for this, for this exercise. And so whatever it is for you, so whatever goal you're trying to achieve, what's that picture that allows you to know that you've achieved that goal? So then what you do is,
I love that question. Let me write that down. So what is the picture or the image or the experience that you have to call for yourself that you've achieved that? Am I saying that right?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's that last step that allows you to know you've achieved that goal. Yes. And then when you look at that picture, what you would do is so two terms that we use is associated and disassociated. I just want to explain those real quick.
Please, yes.
Associated is looking through your own eyes. So if you have an associated memory, that means that, you're seeing everyone else and everything else that's going on in that memory or that thought. When you're disassociated, that means you see yourself in the picture. That means you're like floating above the picture or out of the picture, and you're seeing yourself in that picture, and that's disassociated. You're not in it actively. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is when we have that picture is we want you to get associated. So go inside that picture, looking through your own eyes, and then looking at that through your own eyes, adjust the submodalities so that it's the most compelling picture. So when you look at that picture, you're excited just looking out. So, once again, we talked about the main drivers, the main things. So you would make it brighter. For most people, it's brighter. It's clearer. It's close. You really feel the richness of that picture, and you can feel it inside. You get a feeling when you adjust that picture, and you really know. So it's that picture that just, it's that mouth-watering feeling, when you really, you want it. You're just excited for it. You really want that picture. You make the picture that way. And then what you do is you step out of that picture. So as we were saying, then you get disassociated, and you see yourself in that picture. And that's a part of NLP too. By seeing yourself in that future picture, it helps that picture come true.
Okay.
And then there's two things to do with this. And now we were talking earlier about my training, and my main training is in neurolinguistics, NLP, hypnosis, and then timeline therapy, which, a lot of NLP uses different timelines. This is actual timeline therapy by Tad James, who is my teacher. And what we would do is it's the basis basically is that all of your memories are in a line. And all of your past memories and all your future memories are in a line. And so what I would do with a client is I would have them take that memory and float up above their timeline and float out. Say they want this goal to happen in 6 months. They would float out over their timeline to 6 months from today, and they would drop that memory in their timeline in their future. And then everything between now and then would rearrange itself based on achieving that goal in 6 months.
Oh, nice.
So, or if you're not trained in the timeline therapy, or you're not with someone that is, if you just lock that picture in place, like we did earlier, take that picture of achieving your goal and just lock it into place in your mind. And, you could put a date on it as well. And just know that. So whenever you think of achieving that goal, that compelling picture comes into your mind, and that will drive you. Because our bodies, we program through our filters what we look for. And if you have that beautiful, wonderful, rich, compelling picture in your future of that goal, you are going to work towards getting that. And so that's really how, we talked about living the life you desire. That's something that's works really well.
Sounds very good too. And very clear, because I like the clarity of the steps used here, like step number 1, 2, 3, and so on. That's always very, very helpful.
Yes. So, as we talk about some modalities and, strategies, having the view of, people that are watching us, what questions would you have? Is there anything else that, kind of clarity on, or what do you think?
No, this is very clear so far. I really enjoy it. And so let's go a little bit over, like how can we use this information practically, because everybody has different desires, everybody has different ideas of, having the best of their lives, whether that's, business-wise, relationship-wise, family-wise, professional, or any other ways. So how can we use this? Are there different, modalities to use, submodalities?
So, really talking about earlier, we talked about strategies and, and also with using submodalities within that. If there's an area in your life you're not getting the results that you want, there's two things that I would look at when I talk to clients is strategies and values. Okay. And we can adjust both strategies and values using submodalities. Now, values work in the NLP world, that can be, they use a criteria. So let me clarify that too. So in the little branches, we call it the little branch of NLP that I come from, we call them values. Your classical NLP calls it criteria.
Okay.
And there's a criteria ladder. And what the criteria ladder is what's most important to you. And in the branch that I was trained in, we call them values, and then your most important values. And that's what's important to you about what you do in life. And so you would elicit your values. So say in the context of, say it's career that you want to work on, in the context of career, what's most important to you? And we go through a process to kind of get all these words and find out what your values are. And then we organize them currently where they're at, not where you want them to be at this point, you know, and then find out, okay, so these are your values currently. Now, where do you want your values to be? You know, and sometimes you'll elicit values from somebody with career and money won't be there, or compensation won't be there, and they're not making the money they want. And so it's like, well, or money's like number 10. And it's truly the top 5 values that are important. The reason I mention this in context of some modalities is because how you adjust values is you use the submodalities of the values. So if I want to move a value from number 8 to number 3, I would elicit the submodalities of number 3 and the submodalities of let's say number 10. And then I would change the submodalities of number 10 so they're just behind number 3. So maybe the picture's the same, but maybe it's not as bright. And then that settles that values in that, and just using submodalities, because submodalities adjust the importance of things in our head. And, you know, talking about, so diet's a huge one. Now, I had someone come the other day and ask me about, you know, dieting and health. There's a lot of components to that. If, you know, I love Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't. It's not the best for me, and it's my little treat, and I drink it. But when I say, you know, when I mention Coca-Cola, the picture that I have in my head is that textbook TV commercial. I see the glass that's kind of sweaty a little bit, and the ice, and it's fuzzy and it's pop, and it's very compelling. And I know that for me, I don't want to drink as much soda. So what I can do for me is I can adjust that picture, the submodalities of that picture, so it's not so compelling. And I've actually done that recently. I decided finally it was time to change. And you could do that with that, or say it's a food that, you know, you should eat more broccoli. I love broccoli myself, but some people, that might be a thing where they don't want to eat their vegetables. And if you think of the picture you have of that food, you can make that picture more compelling.
Yeah.
You know?
And one question that comes to mind that I've heard this question from, you know, several people over the years is, how certain are we that the results will stick? Because it's, you know, again, I'm saying, you know, what I've heard myself from other clients and from naysayers out there.
Right.
It sounds a bit of like a kind of a hocus pocus thing where you do this mumbo jumbo stuff and then boom, you're done, but you're not done. You know, like this is too easy, too simple, too fast. So,
Right.
What do you have to say to that?
So one of the things that's very important about when working with a client, and to that point for sure, is testing. So, you know, like we ran through, obviously today we have a limited time and we're not in session, of course. And so when we did some changes on some of your submodalities, and it's like, okay, so how do you feel about that? So the process would be a little bit longer, a little more in depth. And at the very end, we would do what we call clear the screen, and then we would test. And, you know, if it's a long-term client, and let's say, you know, I'm using an example of food because it's a very universal, we all have to eat.
Yeah.
So say someone came to me and they're like, I want to hate chocolate cake. And so what we could do is they could actually have a piece of cake with them. And after we do all the work, say, okay, let's bring that cake out. How do you feel about it?
And just bring the cake out.
Exactly. You know, it sounds a little silly, but it's, you know, the point is testing. So it's very important to test, because they get that. And a lot of, you know, NLP is one of the things called modalities called, you know, fast therapy or quick therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
it can work so quickly. NLP, Richard Bandler and John Grinder back in the early 70s, when they put a bunch of different modalities together, did a lot of testing and found it, it's about results. It's very results driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does work. But to your point, you have to prove it, sometimes. And it's just something that you test. You have to really test and let the person have the
Mm-hmm.
experience of. And there's things that you can do that, like some modality shifts are very strong. And people can
Mm-hmm.
have that very visceral feeling of that change right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it's something where, also being trained in hypnosis, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
If someone says, I can't be hypnotized, okay, you can't be hypnotized. So you want to work with people that want to work, that want to
Yeah.
change. But to the point of, how do you prove it? You do a lot of testing.
Mm-hmm. And then this kind of leads to another question, because many people say, hey, you know what, we've been working today, we've had some results, we had some success, and it's important to allow this to kind of like settle in. Do not go and test, because if you test, it's kind of like you don't believe the result, and therefore you can undermine the very result that you've just gotten because you're trying to test it. Because you don't go and test something you really know it works, right? You don't test it, you just know it works. And so there is this philosophy. What do you think of that?
So, I do agree with you. Speaking in broader terms, yes, I think we know that anyone that uses these techniques knows that a lot of the change happens outside of the room, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
The unconscious mind has to process. The unconscious mind is still working on things and still processing. So in bigger things, yes. In change work,
Mm-hmm.
if we're doing generative change, yes, to your point, I agree 100% that there is going to be a lot of work outside of here.
Mm-hmm.
When we
Mm-hmm.
test, we don't test against something, we test for something. So I
Explain
said,
that a little bit, please.
yes. So like, I mentioned the K kind of in, tongue in cheek, talking about bringing that to them and seeing that changed. But with submodality work, it is fast and it can make that difference
Mm-hmm.
really fast. But if somebody lets a negative emotion go, let's say I'm working with someone and I help them release anger, and
Yeah.
they release their anger from the past.
Okay.
We might check on something, go out in the future and think of something that you might have been angry about in the future and see how you feel now. We might test that way, but NLP is our language, is our middle name, so to speak, right? Linguistics.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful language you use. So you wouldn't go and say, oh, is that anger gone, or is that anger still there? Is that anger? I talked about installation and elicitation. And somebody
Yeah.
that's not trained, that might have all the best intentions, might use that type of language. And so when I test, I wouldn't test. That was what I was saying about going forward positive and not negative. I wouldn't go
Mm-hmm.
negative. I wouldn't say, oh, is that anger still there? Because that's not what's best.
I love how you play with the words. It's like it's like you're almost teasing. Are you sure the anger is not gone?
Exactly. And that's where the training comes in, is that you have to understand that is a possibility. And especially, when we work with people in neurolinguistics, there is a level of trance there too. And you're dealing with the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind takes everything personally. So you do have to be very careful on how you use that language. And that's goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's best to do these techniques with someone who's trained and can walk you through them and really support you to get the best results.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so
So
important.
it's best to do that all the time, or at least in the beginning, because
Yes.
I know there are a lot of people also who are like, oh, you know what? I don't need anybody's help. I am my own master and my own, I lead my life the way I want, and I can achieve everything because I am the whatever, right? So there
Yeah.
are these people who have this kind of attitude, which is not necessarily a bad attitude. I'm not saying that, but it's like sometimes it can backfire. And so coming back to the question, should you use this method or technique always with someone, or just in the beginning, or just when it's like the shit really hits the fan, or when should you use this?
So two things. That's a great point, and two things I'd like to say. My training in NLP, I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot of techniques. And
Mm-hmm.
we know NLP, we love our techniques, and a lot of them are step by step. Okay, so someone
Yeah.
can read a book and read the step by step technique. Where my training truly comes in is when the technique doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Oh, I
what?
like that.
That's where then it's worth it. If you think, well, I can do it myself, and that's great, and a lot of people can, and I'm going to talk to that in a second, and that is great.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have to remember that, so if it doesn't work, what do you do? And that's where the
Mm-hmm.
training and the experience and the knowledge, that's where the wisdom comes. There's knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge
Yeah.
is I can read a script, and then there's wisdom. I know what to do, and I can read the client and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you had mentioned is very true too, but to my point, you'd have to be trained in it and then do it by yourself to be really good at it, to be trained at it. So a lot of people take that NLP practitioner course just for
Mm-hmm.
themselves. It's
Yeah.
truly, it's the guidebook for the mind, as they say. It's using
Yeah.
that, and you just really gain that total control of self. You are ready to help other people at that time, at that point, with that knowledge level, for sure, completely. But it really helps you work with yourself. So even if you don't want to help BC clients or at that extent, that training still is there for you. So to your
Mm-hmm.
point, yes, you can definitely do NLP with yourself. Personally, I'll be very honest here. I've been doing this for a fair amount of time, and
Yeah.
I'm knowledgeable, and I've got a good skill set. Realistically, and this might sound a little funny, I have the training tapes from my training courses, that
Yeah.
they did, and I'll break those out. I'll go through. I'll have the voice of one of my trainers walk me through a technique, and I know what the technique is, and I know how to do it, and I could walk myself through it. But
Yeah.
I personally, I appreciate having that guide. I jokingly say that I'm a tour guide with my clients.
Yeah.
I just help them get to where they're going, and I enjoy that myself. I like to have that tour guide. So even though
Mm-hmm.
I'm trained and could do it, I prefer it. Now other people, if it works for them, that's great. But just make sure that you do have a full understanding of it before you start, especially like these submodalities. They're very strong. Like you were saying, you took that pleasant memory, and when you made it black and white, it really it took the, not to put words in your mouth, but it took the energy off of it.
Yeah. It took the life out of it. That's what I said.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and and that's something that we want to keep those good positive memories. We want to live that positive life. And so if you get to a point where something was to happen and you were to lose that or something, then that would be something that'd be negative.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, can you give us a few examples of, different cases where you've been using this method with your clients, and the results they got, if possible at all, of course, without disclosing any personal information, but something that people can kind of like think of, latch on, get inspired by.
Definitely. And there's one technique that I'm not going to share the whole technique. Um,
Yes.
but it's called logical levels and sequential coaching. It's not based
Okay.
on Robert Dilts' logical levels. It's a different technique. But basically what you do is it's a scramble, so to speak. And
Okay.
I'll explain that in a second. So we talked about having strategies, and within those strategies, you have submodalities attached to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is if someone's having a problem, and I was thinking about this morning, talking about examples, and there's no names involved, and this is not particular to a person. So I'm going to share, this is a real event, but this person lives nowhere near me, and this was a little bit ago.
Yeah.
They were having issues. They had to take drug tests for work.
Okay. Yeah.
And let's say that we know what that type of test is, and
Mm-hmm.
they were having a performance issue of being able to fulfill the test, so to speak. He would get a call at his desk, and they would say, okay, in 45 minutes, you have to report to the men's restrooms and you're going to take this test. And
Wow.
he was at a point where he wasn't able to perform that test, and it was putting his job in jeopardy because it was coming off like he didn't want to do it, not that he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So what this technique does, and it's submodalities work, is that I found out what was his strategy for taking that test. What was the first thing he saw? What was the first thing he heard, et cetera, walking through that strategy. And what we did was, well, let me just say real quick. So what you do is you find out what that is, and so you find out, how do you do it? When do you do it? How do you know it's time to do it? Some cause and effects questions from NLP. And then it's kind of fun. You have to have rapport to do it, but you say, teach me to do it. I'm going to be a temp agency and teach me how to do this problem you're having, because you're going to be away from work tomorrow. You're taking a vacation, and I want to make sure, and then you use hypnotic language. I don't want to make sure to totally forget it. I don't want to mess it up and forget how to do this, when you work with them and that, and you kind of tweak that a little bit, and that makes them the authority, and they disassociate. We talked about that, right? So it takes that off of them. They disassociate from the problem. It's not them anymore.
But I've used this sometimes, and it's not but, I'm just, playing here devil's advocate. And I've used this with clients, and they say, well, I don't know how I'm doing it. It just happens. It happens to me. I'm not doing it. There's no intention on my part to make that happen. It just happens that way. So I don't know what to tell you on how I'm doing it, because I'm not intending it.
Right. And so that's a little deeper onto, what we do. But that's when you have to have rapport. And that's when you help them. So what's the first thing you see? Is it something you see? Is it something you hear? And you just have that patience and you walk them through it. Well, I don't know. Well, just walk me through it. Well, I walk in and I see the guy, and then this happens, and then I can't do it.
Yeah.
Oh, so the first thing is a picture. You make a picture in your mind. Well, yeah. And you support them on that journey to learn how to do it, because part of NLP is also teaching NLP, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great point. And you're going to have those clients that might not make pictures in their minds, and it might be hard for them to do it, but you just support them along that journey. And that's what happens with people that are kind of newer to the process or haven't done the process. We live it. We know, well, of course, is that visual kinesthetic you just did? Or, is that, we have our jargons, and we know what it is, but you just really, you support them in the model of the world, you support them where they're at, and that's where they're at. And then you help them along their journey. So let's try this, let's see, what is it? Okay. Oh, and then what happens? Well, I don't know. And then I don't know, I get this feeling inside, whatever. Oh, well, where's that feeling at? Is it inside? Is it in your head? Is it in your stomach? And by doing this and working with them and giving them these layers, it's almost like you give them permission to make pictures. Because there might be something in their past where making pictures was not a positive thing. So if you're not working with someone in depth, and you're working with them as a one-off, so to speak, they came to you for specific, like my client came to me for just this issue, they might have some stuff in the past where making pictures was not the most positive. So you support them, you make sure they're in a safe place, and you help them along that journey, and then you get them to expose it. So that's a great point. But, and and then you change your modalities to what we do. If it doesn't work, you might change how you approach that with them. But for the most part, if you walk them through it, that you can get to that point.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that was great, because it's so important to cover the basis and the what ifs, and as you know yourself, there are so many what ifs that clients come up with, and people who are watching would also come up with what ifs. And so I wanted to ask these questions precisely to kind of clear any setbacks or obstacles that people might see with using this type of intervention.
Right. Yeah. And I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great because, like I said, the unconscious competence comes in, right? We know, we forget what we know, and we just do it. I just, I do these techniques with people, and it's like, okay. And then when things come up, because they do, that you work with clients, things come up, you shift. and
Yeah.
you just,
Yeah.
okay, you don't, well, I'm not going to keep going against this. I'll work with it because this is the technique I think will work. And you try to get them in that, but if it doesn't work, then you try
Hmm.
something different. And that's the great thing, being curious. The two things I would tell anybody: be curious and have a flexible mindset.
Mm.
That'll carry you through so much in life, and especially with neurolinguistics. If you're here, you're new to NLP, or like I said, or if you're a master, teacher,
Yeah.
trainer, we should all be curious. We all keep that curiosity and flexibility in our thoughts.
Now, I want to press on the be flexible, because different people understand different things when we mention this word flexible. So can you please, tell us your version or your understanding of the meaning of being flexible?
I'll quote Wayne Dyer.
Yes.
Nobody knows enough to be a pessimist. We'll start with that. So, being flexible is being open to different ways of working.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it's from Hawaiian, so I won't quote it directly, but my instructor also taught something called Huna. And there's a saying that says, think not that all knowledge exists in your school. And
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
so it's that mindset where you come from a place of the flexibility is like, I don't know everything and I can learn more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just having that to start from there is an amazing place.
Yeah, I'm taking notes as you're speaking.
Yeah, it's
All
very
right.
strong, and one
Yeah.
thing I want to just mention on the end, if I have a couple minutes here, just on the end of this
Yeah, of course.
process,
Absolutely.
the way you end this process, and this is where it's a little silly, but when you work with clients, humor is so important. For me, it's one of
Mm-hmm.
my values, or for my friends out there in the NLP world, it's criteria is humor. And I use humor a lot. And so I build rapport, but with this technique. So once you have them teach you do it, so then you take it and you scramble the submodalities. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like taking a needle. If those out there remember what records are, it's like taking the needle and scratching the record, and you really destroy
Yeah.
that because they have a set way they do it. So if
Mm-hmm.
you say, oh, well, the first thing I do is I see a picture, and you're like, and you ask them, say, oh, is that picture black and white, really dark, far off on the corner?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're going to say no, because those submodalities are not a strong submodality. They're probably seeing it bright. So once they say that, then you say, oh, well, could it be and still work? And then they
Mm-hmm.
have to try it on. They have to look at that
Mm-hmm.
picture in their head, and they change that picture to that black and white, small and dark. And they're like, no, that can't work. And you're like, okay. So you're like, well, what happens next? And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I hear a voice. I hear someone saying I can't do it. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, and then, you could take it as silly as you want, or whatever that rapport is. You could be like, oh, is it, Donald Duck's voice is a high pitched voice. It's, oh my God, you can't do
Yeah.
it. Mickey Mouse. And they're like, no. And you're like, oh, well, could it be and still work? And they have to, what we call try it on, right? They have to hear
Yeah.
that saying in that voice, and you run through that. And then usually they're laughing by the end. But what this does is this scrambles their strategy using the submodalities. You take them
Mm-hmm.
to the far end. So if they say, oh, I get this feeling inside, I get this really dreadful feeling inside, and you would say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, is it a light kind of tingly feeling and it kind of tickles you and it's draining out of your foot down there into the floor? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, no. And you say, well, could it be and still work? And they try that on. And so what you're doing is you're actually doing those submodality shifts, and you go through it a few
Yeah.
times. And by the end of that, they most likely will not be able to get that strategy back. And then you could help
Mm-hmm.
them install a new strategy and new submodalities from there. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. Wow, I really love this presentation. Thank you so much, Jason, for
Yes.
the amazing information you've blessed us with. Where can people get in touch with you? How can they reach out to you? What is your website, your contact details?
Thank you. Yep. So, and it's been great being here. I appreciate giving the time and the interaction. So my company name is One Path Coaching. the words one path and coaching. And my website is onepathcoaching.com. And on there, you can find my social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm on the pretty pictures. And also I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well, but I'm not so active. That's just a face. So, onepathcoaching.com. And if you want to email me directly, I'm more than happy with that. onepathcoaching@gmail.com. And if you have any questions or need any support, I see clients all over the United States. I haven't done an international client yet, but I'm open to that. But I do all my stuff through a HIPAA certified site, and I see people every day.
Amazing. Jason, again, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Eugene.
All right, everyone, let's take a quick break, and we'll see you after the break for the next presentation. We'll see you tomorrow. It depends which comes first. Stay tuned, stay happy, stay NLPing, and we'll see you soon.